Excuse me, does anyone hear Boom Marissa? I don't think we can hear you.
Okay, what about now? What about now?
I can hear you. Okay. I'm sorry. We have a trouble with the microphone, I think. Okay, let me start again. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Our Honorable Mr. Handong Trioko, MHUM-MAD, as the head of Language Development Unit. And of course, the Honorable Miss Raquel S. Wang, the Teachers College, Columbia University, USA, as the presenter today. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We have so many participants around Indonesia from Sumatra, Borneo, Sulawesi, and other parts of Indonesia. Even we have participants from other countries like India. Thank you. First thing first, let me introduce myself. My name is Marisa, and I'm the chief of the committee in this webinar presented by Language Development Unit, UPTPB IAIN Salatiga. Today, Wednesday, the 22nd of July 2020, we are presenting a webinar entitled Books Can Bring Us Together, Community and Creativity During the Pandemic, presented by Ms. Raquel S. Wang, Teachers College, Columbia University, USA, and English Language Fellow, 2018 until 2020, Manado, Indonesia. And also Mr. Hanung Trioko, MHUM-MAD, the head of Language Development Unit, PTBB IAIN Salatiga, and the coordinator of English and of the Consortium of the Language Centers of Islamic Higher Education, PTKIN, across Indonesia. Just a little opening before we get started. In this special morning, we have several agendas, so allow me to read several sequences of our agenda. The first is opening, and secondly, we have information about the webinar regulation for participants. And the third, the first webinar presentations, and then also the Q&A session 1. After that, the second webinar presentation, then Q&A session 2. And the next, giving online certificate to the presenters officially, and the last, online photo session and closing. Well, to take advantage of the time, let's start the agenda by saying Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Step the following agenda is informing the regulation for participants of UPTPB 2020 webinar. The first, the participant ID in this webinar must use the real name, not device name or the name of the institution. Next, participants who get access to Zoom must dress modestly and behave politely when the webinar is held. Participants will automatically be muted by the host during the webinar process. Next, all participants who follow the webinar via Zoom or YouTube can ask questions by type questions capitally and then proceed with writing the name of the institutions, professions, and the question in a concise manner. Then the moderator will deliver a number of questions to the presenter because the time for discussion is limited, only 15 minutes. Then certificates will be distributed to the participants who register and attend the event from the beginning to the end of the webinar. Then at the end of the event, the attendance link will be shared. The link will only be active for 30 minutes. And the last, participants who do not fill out the Google registration form before the event starts and or do not fill in the attendance list when the event is finished will not get a certificate. All right. Hopefully the participants can understand those regulations. Now let's start the main agenda, namely the webinar presentations. So please welcome our moderator, Mr. Muhammad Hasbi MA. He is our IAIN Salatiga alumni of English Education Department. Then he continued his master's degree in EFL University, Hyderabad, India. And now he is an English lecturer in IAIN Salatiga. And inshallah, he is going to take his PhD overseas program next year through 2021 Mora 5,000 doctors. Now, without further time, we will turn the time over to Mr. Hasbi. Please.
Okay, hi everyone. Do you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so yeah, just to check if the sound here is working. So first of all, I would like to say thank you to the Master of Ceremony as well as the committee of this webinar, Ms. Marisa, who have opened this great webinar program. And here I will be the moderator for the 2 sessions of this webinar. And first of all, I would like to just quick introduction that my name is Muhammad Hasbi, and yes, I'm one of the lecturer in EIN Salatiga, and I'm teaching English. It has been 4 years of my teaching, and it is a great honor for me to be included in this program as the moderator, and I'm very happy to be introducing the 2 great speakers for today, Miss Rachel Wang. Rachel, I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing it correctly, but that's just how I.
Yeah, that's great, Rachel. Yes,
Okay,
you're
yeah,
doing right.
Okay, yeah. So the second speaker will be Mr. Hanung Trioko, but first of all, we will have the first session first. So just to repeat what has been informed by the Master of Ceremony just now, that each session will be 1 hour long, 45 minutes will be the delivery of presentation, and then 15 minutes will be the Q&A session. So for audience, for the participants, if you would like to ask, you can just type directly your questions in the chat box on Zoom or on YouTube. So you can even deliver your questions during the presentation. So when we have the question and answer session, we already get your question and then just read it, and then the speaker will be answering directly. So this is like a suggestion. If participants have questions, please type it during the presentations of the presenters. Okay, so I think that everybody got that point. So I think we can start now with the first session, but before I give the screen moment to the speaker, I would like to inform a little bit about the bio of the speaker. So the speaker's name is Rachel S1. When we heard her name, probably we think that she's Chinese, but who knows, maybe she's American or both, from both region. So probably she will be also introducing herself later. So she graduated, she took Bachelor of Art in University of Wisconsin Madison, and then she continued her master degree, the Master of Arts in Applied Linguistics in Teachers College, Columbia University. And what's impressive about her is she got 3.9 GPA for bachelor degree and for a perfect score of 4 GPA in master degree. So it's just like a dreamy achievement for every students in the university, right? And I failed to do so. So when I look at her curriculum video, I was just like, wow, this is like the best of the best, probably the best of the best from the two university when she was taking the study there. Okay, and also not only that her education took place in America, she has also international teaching experiences. So she has been teaching in Manado, Indonesia. She has been teaching in New York and then in China and also Japan. So she has a lot of teaching experience abroad. And she has done research experience as well. And then there are so many publication and presentation. From the list, I could take like 30 publications and presentations, so I could not read it one by one because it's too long. So, and there are also some honors and awards that she has received. The first one is Kapadil Tapi Honor Society in Education in 2018, and then Teachers College Scholarship in 2016 until 2018, and there are 3 others more. Because we want to save the time for the great presentation, so we will just directly give the moment for our first speaker, Rachel. So it's your time now.
Okay, thank you, Pat, for the very nice introduction and for explaining my entire CV to everyone. Let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my title page?
Yeah.
Of the presentation? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, so the title of my talk today is Books Can Bring Us Together, Creativity and Community During the Pandemic. And I'm so happy to be here. So thank you so much to EIN Salatiga for inviting me. And I'm so glad to have the chance to talk with you today. So today's plan, I would like to ask a couple questions. First, how can we get students excited about reading? And second, how can we include local culture in our teaching? And then I will share my creative project as an example, which I did in person and also online over Zoom. Okay, so first let me introduce myself a little bit more. Here's some pictures from me teaching in Indonesia, but I am actually from America, the US. My hometown is Madison, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the state. It's here and it's near Canada. Has anyone heard of Wisconsin? Oh, someone in the chat mentioned that, oh, they know about Wisconsin from the book Little House in the Prairie. Yes, exactly. So it's very cold in the winter and I personally hate snow. So I was very happy to live in Indonesia with nice weather all the year round. But maybe you're wondering about my parents. So it's a little complicated, but my mom is from Taiwan. My dad is from China. My dad's mom is from Japan, my grandma, and I'm from Wisconsin, okay? So that's my complicated family history. But I want you to know that Americans look like a lot of different faces and a lot of different, come from a lot of different places, just like Indonesia, right? There's so much diversity in Indonesia. I love that my favorite thing about America and Indonesia is the diversity of people. And when I was in Indonesia, I really liked learning about local cultures and local languages. Unfortunately, I only know Matur Nuang in Bahasa Jawa, but I know some Bahasa Manado. Okay. And I would like to explain that these are pictures of US citizens. So the unique thing about the US is that if you are born there, you are automatically a US citizen, okay? And some people become US citizens later on. Like my parents, they have been living in the US for a very long time, like 40 or more years, and they're also US citizens now too. And I would like you to know that Native Americans, or Orang Asli, the indigenous people to America, actually look like this, okay? So I want to share a little bit about the diversity of America. So I said that I'm from Madison, Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin is famous for having a lot of cows and a lot of cheese and milk. And I heard that Boyolali is famous for milk. Is that right? So I guess Wisconsin is similar to Boyolali, the Boyolali of America, okay? And so my background, as mentioned, is that I've always been interested in language. So I studied linguistics and TESOL, teaching English, for my S1, and for S2 I wanted to become a better teacher, so I did my master's. And then the past 2 years I have been an English language fellow at UNSA. If you are from EIN Salatiga, I'm in the same program as Devin, and I actually wanted to visit Devin before our program ended, but unfortunately because of the pandemic, it's very sad I didn't have the chance to visit Salatiga. And she told me so many nice things about the place and the people. So hopefully in the future I have the chance to visit. Oh, some people in the chat said that they're from Boyolali. Great. So we have similar backgrounds, cows and cheese and milk. Okay, so I've taught in Japan at a high school, China at a university, New York City, I taught adults there. And can you tell this is Manado? Has anyone else from Manado besides, I saw Bu Halima is from EIN Manado. She's here. Which is awesome. Okay, so this is me and my students. I was teaching at Universitas Samratulangi, UNSAT. I had big classes. A lot of my classes had like 40 students or even 70 students. That was a lot. But now I am back in Madison, in my hometown, living with my parents for now during the pandemic. And so it is nighttime here, but I'm staying awake just for you, okay? And I'm very happy for the opportunity. So first I would like to talk about the reading situation in Indonesia. And this information is from IERA, the Indonesian Extensive Reading Association. And they shared some information about Indonesia with me. Okay, so first, the problem, I think, is that a lot of students have low motivation to read, and people in general. So maybe when you ask students to read, they're like this cat, and they are very like, no, I'm not excited to read. Do you agree with your students? And you say, okay, let's read today. Are students like this cat? I think that people don't find reading fun, and Indonesia's literacy level, according to the PISA test in 2015, is pretty low, 62 out of 74. And I asked, why don't people like to read? Like, what's going on, right? So according to IERA, we think that there's 3 different reasons. One is that there's this idea that math and science scores, if you get high math and science test scores, that you're considered smart in Indonesian society. Is that right? I heard that at some high schools, like if you get high test scores, you get put into math and science. And if you have low test scores, you get put in language classes. Is that right? Okay. So obviously that's very untrue because there's so many smart people in language and humanities and social science. Like look at everyone here. And also it's important for everyone to have a good background in literacy and to be able to communicate. Someone is annotating the screen. Please don't write on the screen. Thank you. I appreciate your enthusiasm though. The reading, another reason is that reading is not really in the family culture or society's culture. So how many of you or how many Indonesian families at home have a lot of books around for fun, not textbooks or religious books? And so I think there's not so much the culture of like growing up reading to like kids, like bedtime stories, right? And finally, when I ask students, reading is just studying, right? But it's not just studying, okay? So let's talk about it. Also, according to IAIN, you know, Indonesia is very strong, has a very strong oral tradition, right? Like storytelling. And now a lot of people, the visual digital culture is really popular in Indonesia, right? Everyone's on social media, but we're kind of missing the reading culture part. So that's what we're hoping to change. And also we want to talk about there's two types of reading. So one is intensive reading. So intensive reading is like slow, it's about building skills and it's more focused on testing. For example, in class, the teacher has students read an article and then after students take a multiple choice, answer some multiple choice questions, right? Or true false questions. Does that sound familiar? Yes? But I think that most teachers usually do intensive reading and not so many people are doing extensive reading. Okay, extensive reading is more fast, it's more building fluency, and it's more focused on pleasure or for fun. Okay, so this student, this boy here read so many books, look, and he's enjoying all of them. So it's not about focusing on the specifics for a test, it's more about reading for fun. Okay, all right. So let's go into extensive reading a little bit more. The definition that I want to give you is extensive reading is reading a lot of easy, enjoyable books. And so I want you to remember this definition. So you can leave your microphone muted, but can you say it out loud at home? Reading a lot of easy, enjoyable books. Okay, you said it out loud at home? Okay, try saying it again without. Extensive reading is reading a lot of easy, enjoyable books. All right, so I want you to remember the definition of extensive reading. Extensive reading is reading a lot of easy, enjoyable books. You got it? You repeat it at home? I'll do it one more time. Okay, I hope that you, yes, great. Thank you, person in the chat. Okay, so reading for fun. All right, so let's look at this picture. Someone who enjoys reading will read more. And if they read more, they will understand more. And if they understand more, then they will read faster. And if they read faster, then they will enjoy reading more. Okay, so I think the key is really to start with reading for fun, that reading is fun. And if someone enjoys it, then they will get better at it through practice, right? It's also important to start young, but that's okay if, you know, we're not young, but we can start now, okay? But if you have kids or if you have adik-adik, you can read books with them and show them that books are just stories and stories are fun, right? And ask them, what do you see? Who's your favorite character? Okay. So the point is that as teachers, we want to encourage students to read for fun and not for tests or negative pressure. Because if you associate reading with tests, then of course it's not going to be fun and you're not going to want to do it, right? So again, do you remember the definition of extensive reading? Extensive reading is, say it out loud at home, reading a lot of easy, enjoyable books. Okay, I want to talk about the easy part now. So I just talked about a lot. So books should be easy. So there's something called the 5-finger rule. That's where if you open a book, you look at one page. Oh, you can't see anything because of the. If you look at just one page and you count how many words you don't know on that page, maybe just one word, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 words. Okay, if it's 5 words or more, it's too hard for you, okay? So when I started learning Indonesian and I tried to read a book, I don't know like 10 words on the page. And that means that book is too hard for me. Okay, so try to find books that are just you only don't know 2 or 3 words. That's the 5-finger rule. Okay, why is that important? So do you see what this girl is reading here? What kind of book is this? Looks like a dictionary, right? Okay, do you like reading dictionaries? Are dictionaries fun to read? No, dictionaries are not fun to read, right? So we don't want to make, exactly, people in the chat are saying boring, no, exactly. So you want to choose easy enough books so that you can read without your dictionary. See, look how happy this boy is. It's because the story is at his level. Maybe he used the 5-finger rule, okay? Reading, let's think of reading as a long-term investment. So if you plant the seed, it takes a long time to grow over time, but there's a lot of benefits to reading. Like it will improve also your speaking, your listening, your vocabulary, your spelling, probably your grammar too. You'll become a better writer just by reading more, right? Okay. It's not a fake smile. That's fake news, okay? He's real. I talked with him. All right, so you want to expand your idea of reading. So when I asked my students, do you like reading? They said no. And I was like, what do you think reading is? And they just said textbooks or religious texts. Reading is more than just textbooks and the Quran, okay, or the Bible, right? Reading is also novels. Does anyone like to read novels? Do you know what Wattpad is? My students taught me about Wattpad. It has like fan fiction and stuff that people, hello, cute baby. Even babies can learn about reading. Comics are also reading, right? Do you like reading comics or graphic novels? Anyone? What do you like reading? You can tell me in the chat, okay? And of course, picture books are also reading. And I would like to share this quote with you. Oh, great. People in the chat said that they like to read in Wattpad. That's reading too. Some people said comics, especially manga. That's great. So this quote says, it's from an author, Lara Prescott. The quote says, books books allow us to experience other lives, visit other time periods, walk the streets of places we've never been, and they build connection. Okay, so when you've read a book, do you feel like you can travel to another place? Maybe in the time of pandemic and you have to stay at home, but you can travel to somewhere else using a book. Okay, great. Some people in the manga said, yeah, they do feel like they can travel. So books build connection, like this author says. So reading really connects us with other people because we can read and learn about other perspectives. And it teaches us empathy because we can learn about different opinions, right? And empathy means understanding how other people feel, right? So through books, we can understand other people more. That's really great. And it's fun too. Ways that you can introduce extensive reading in your class. I like to use Drop Everything and Read, called Dear Time, okay? In Dear Time, students choose whatever books that they want and they read for 10 or 15 minutes. And because it's for fun, so if they don't like the book, they can just change their book. They don't have to finish it, okay? It's not homework, it's for fun. So this is what Dear Time looked like in my class. This was my 4th semester class. Actually, I cropped it so there's more students who are not in the picture. I think I had about 40 students, 35 to 40 who actually came. And my classroom didn't have electricity, but luckily there's enough light. And I didn't have enough books at first, so I had them share. See, they're sharing. And I think they enjoyed the books. But ideally, it's better if you can have enough books for everyone. So then later, I printed out free books from Let's Read Asia. Has anyone heard of Let's Read Asia? It has free children's books that you can print, and it can be in English. They also have Bahasa Indonesia or Bahasa Jawa and other languages. And some of them are really short. So the printing cost is low if you want to save money at the print shop. You know, being a teacher is expensive. So you can use this website. Also, I would like to say that the teacher has to be the model as well. So if you ask students to read for 15 minutes in class, the teacher can't be on their phone or grading something, right? Because then students will see you and then they'll be like, reading is not important because the teacher is not doing it, okay? So this picture is from my workshop at EIN Manado. And when I ask the participants to do it, then I also have to read because I'm the model. And so I would like to share with you my Books Bring Us Together unit. This is the unit that I did in my class. The unit goals were to change students' minds and make them feel like reading is fun, okay? And also I wanted my students to make children's books. And I was inspired by Let's Read Asia and Bahasa Bali. Bahasa Bali has these comics here, or these like picture books. In 3 languages, they had English, Bahasa Indonesia, and Bahasa Bali, okay? And I wanted students to be able to practice their English in a fun and creative way, all right? So last fall in semester ganjil, I had them create trilingual children's books. So each page had 3 languages, and these were the results. Actually, there should be 10, but I only had 7 when I took this picture. I had groups of 4 students make a book, and I told them to incorporate or use local culture. So like cultural traditions from Manado, like the food or holidays, etc. Okay, so here's an example of what students created. This is trilingual script, so you can see there's English, there's Bahasa Indonesia, and then there's Bahasa Manado. And the student actually learned to use paint for this project. I didn't expect high quality illustrations, but my students surprised me. They're very creative. And they had a really great message of the story. This story was about unity in diversity, or Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. And that was really great because now I have this book. I brought it back from Indonesia. I can't see, you can't see it. Anyway, here's this book. I'm going to bring this book to whatever country I go to next. And then my students in that new country will be able to learn about Indonesia and Manadonese culture, which is really amazing. So in the fall, in semester Ganjil, we shared, why is it green? Oh, okay. We shared our books in groups in class, but of course we have the pandemic now, so we can't do it in the classroom in person, right? So the question is, how did we go from this in person working in groups to this Zoom reality? So I want to tell you about my bookmaking project during the pandemic. All right, so here's an example. I asked them to make very small books, mini books, that you can make with just one piece of paper. Okay, so the project goals during this semester Ganap, was that students create mini books to teach kids about local animals and plants, because my theme was conservation. And I wanted them to feel that reading is fun, so encourage extensive reading. And because I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, and they're in some in Manado, some in Central Sulawesi, scattered around Eastern Indonesia, I wanted to build community by reading together. Okay, this is how I graded them. I will just send this PowerPoint later so you can see it clearly, but I graded based on content, language, and delivery. I wanted them to use a salute animal plant that needed to be protected, and for them to submit the script in 3 languages, and to keep the story very short and simple, only about like 6 to 15 sentences if they can, and only 6 to 9 pages because it's a very small book. Okay, and I wanted to make the work a lot less during the pandemic, right? Yes, I will send this PowerPoint to EIN Salatiga committee later, and they can share it with all the participants. Okay, so part 1 of my project was I wanted to introduce students to children's books, and I chose books with animal characters. So here you have the slow loris, you have a fish, you have a dinosaur. When it was in person last semester in the fall, I read it to them in person. So a teacher reads the children's books out loud. But in Zoom, I had to do it online like this. All right. And I also did this because I wanted to connect the oral culture with the reading culture, you know, because Indonesia is based on oral culture, oral traditions. When you read a book out loud, it's like you're telling the story, and it makes it very exciting for my students. And also there's pictures. So we connect the oral culture and reading culture. I also used YouTube read alouds. If you search for, go to youtube.com and search read aloud, this term, you will find lots of free videos of English picture books, because I know that in Indonesia, it's difficult to get access to English books, right? And it's very expensive. So one way I used YouTube is free, and I assigned them homework from my favorite channel, which is called Storyline Online. They have some actors to read the picture book in a very interesting way. So their homework was to watch the YouTube video and read the book by watching the video. And then afterwards, they answered a question like, what's your favorite part or your favorite character, or how many stars do you give this rating? How many stars do you give this book? Like 1 star, 2 star, 5 stars, and why? Okay. So the language focus for this part was that students would be able to explain their opinion and give a reason why. Like, I think the message of this story is blah, 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 because blah, blah, blah. And that they could learn to summarize in one sentence. And this was practicing speaking and listening, right? Okay, part 2. So I introduced students to conservation, like protecting nature, basically. So I invited Dea, who is the founder, one of the 2 founders of Salute Semanga, which is a YSEALI project. You can follow them at their Instagram at Salute Semanga if you want. Basically, Dea explained to my students as a guest speaker, she explained to them about why it's important to protect nature, protect the environment. I think that's a really important topic in Indonesia and America and the world today, right? So part 3, students created stories about local species. So North Sulawesi has a lot of special species. Do you know tarsius or yaki or hornbill or couscous? Have you heard of babirusa, anoa? Obviously, we have mangroves and dugongs, right? Let me know in the chat if you've heard of any of these species. So they're very special, and students needed to use one of the animals as a character. So the language focus was that students would use transitions in writing their story, like one day, or suddenly, or eventually, like this. So we're practicing writing. Okay, so the results. Here are my students' beautiful books. They're all very small, you can see, so it's not that much work. But the biggest challenge is to make a story, but it's very short and simple for elementary age students. Here's an example. My student wrote a story called Giselle the Brave, and it's about a babirusa who is, she has very long tusks, and all of the other friends make fun of her for having really long tusks. So it had a good message about like making fun of friends and not doing that, right? And for feeling different, that kind of thing. I really like this one. So total, what we accomplished together was a total of 70 stories and we mentioned 50 species. So that was really exciting. And then the last part 4, students shared their books out loud. So we are using books to build community because they're telling their stories. It was really fun. And the language focus for this was that the student would be able to read out loud interactively. So, you know, sometimes reading, if students are like, once upon a time, there was a babirusa, blah, 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 blah. It's not very interesting, right? So we practiced together how to stress keywords, use intonation, and pauses are very important. And to make it fun, like change the voice, like hello or hello, and use sound effects like boom or crash, right? And then they also gave feedback on what they liked about their classmates' stories. So this practiced reading, speaking, and also if they're writing their comments in the chat, that's also writing. So that was my project. It had 4 parts and we were able to do it. You could do this project and you could adapt it for a different theme. So I did local culture and then I did conservation. You could also do like family, like students could write a book. Each page is about their family, like my dad is, my mom is, whatever, or their hobbies, or like if you have very low-level students, you can use simple language. So for this one, this example, it's a real book in the US. It's called Where's Spot? Okay, and then each page is like, is he in the box? No, no, no. Is he in the piano? No, no. And each page is a different question. So there's only one sentence on the page, and you could also have students write just one sentence on the page and draw a picture. Like my favorite color is, my favorite food is, my favorite place is, or maybe the theme can be about what I did in quarantine. What is helping me survive lockdown, right? So I want to tell you that making physical books in online classes with Indonesian students, it is possible. You can see my students' faces here. There's some pictures here. It can be very simple, you know, just pencil drawing like that. This one's about a bird. Yeah, so it is possible. I believe that you can do it because I was able to do it, even though I'm not even in the same country, okay? So I want to end by saying that challenges are, this is what I always tell my students. I always tell my students, challenges are opportunities for growth. So that means we have a lot of challenges for online teaching and online learning, but those are also opportunities for us to grow and to learn, okay? So there's so many challenges now, but we've already learned, like, for example, before I didn't know how to use Zoom, and now I feel like a Zoom expert, right? So there's lots of challenges, but that also means lots of opportunities. And that books really are able to bring us together. I really believe that. And I think that this is a good way for you to keep a feeling of community in your online classes. Have them create small books and share them with each other. Short, very short, you know, only 6 to 9 pages, only 6 to 10 sentences if they can, okay? So my challenge is for you, let's all make reading fun. I believe that we can do it, okay? So I challenge you, let's make reading fun. Okay, so I'd like to open up for any questions. These pictures are from my workshop, Internate, with teachers there. They read these books that my students created and also free books from Let's Read Asia. And then so this is Dear Time, and then this is them sharing what they liked about the books later. And I will also share my contact. My email is rachel.wang.teaching@gmail.com. You can write your question in the chat while I'm waiting for that. And you can also follow me on Instagram, but I'm not on Instagram very often. So if you have questions about the presentation, probably email is better. Also, IATA has their social media, Relo, and US Embassy too, okay? And there are additional resources. So when you get this PowerPoint, you can look at these. Global Storybooks also has free stories, but it has levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Level 1 is very easy for beginners, and 5 is more difficult. So that's one difference from Let's Read Asia. And Storyline Online, that's the YouTube channel I like. And ER Foundation has some handouts with tips. Okay, great. Any questions?
Hello, do you hear me, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay, so I assume that you have done with your presentation, and now we are going to the Q&A session. Okay, so for everyone, for the participants who would like to ask questions to Rachel, you can drop your question again in the Zoom chat box or in the YouTube chat box. And meanwhile waiting your questions, we already have got 2 questions, I think, here in the Zoom chat box. So I will just read it for Rachel, and then later you will be answering them. So the first question is from Nur Halimah. Maybe this is the Bu Halimah that you mentioned earlier. So the question
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. How to change the student's mindset that reading doesn't always mean studying? Can you give some tips to motivate the students for building their good literacy? I think this is very related with your material regarding the problems, reading problems in Indonesia. You have mentioned that before, but probably she needs more elaboration on that matter. And then the second question.
Mhm.
The second question is, I'd love the way you teach reading for fun. I think you are not only make them like to read, but also forcing them to be creative in writing directly. But before that, Sulis also mentioned, I'd like the way to teach the students. So probably some ideas of how to teach reading to the students. Yeah, I think we will have that two questions first, and then we will continue with other question later. So two questions first, and then the other question later.
Okay, great. So for the first question, how to change students' mindsets, I actually, so first I introduce the idea of extensive reading to them. So I actually give them this part of the presentation. Like I tell them the problem in Indonesia, why that happens, like it's not in the culture, because some of my students thought like, oh, maybe Indonesians are lazy, that's why they don't like to read. But no, it's not because of that. It's just because of the culture and the fact that there's not a lot of chances to read for fun, right? In schools and things like that. So I actually tell students about intensive versus extensive, and then tell them like, if you like to read for fun, you will read more and you'll read better. So we're going to focus on reading for fun. And then I also explain like, I ask students, what are some types of reading, or what are some things that you can read, right? So we can talk about magazines, we can talk about picture books, fan fiction, right? So I actually have this discussion with my students. And then for Dear Time, I provide lots of fun books. So like from Let's Read Asia, and I also brought some children's books. So I think the key is to find fun things that students are interested in reading. I also had some English news for you things. So I think that's the two things that I would do. One, explain to students about extensive reading. What is that? Why there's low motivation in Indonesia to read. It's not Indonesians' fault. It's just that the culture is different and that we can change the culture through our classrooms. So the second thing is to provide lots of interesting material for students to read that is, like I mentioned before, very easy for students. So it's not hard. It's not like reading a dictionary. Great question. The other question was activities for teaching reading. So Dear Time is one activity that I use a lot. And then after Dear, I have them make groups. Like this picture, I have them make groups of like 3 people. And I also have them, let me copy a slide from my other PowerPoint. I'm gonna, when I send the PowerPoint, I'm gonna send the full version. So here, can you see the post-reading activity slide? So after they read, I give them like 6 questions on the board, and we use the dice. What is it? Pake dadu? Is that right? And you roll the dice, and the number that you get is the number you have to answer. Okay, so if I roll number 4, and then it's like, where do you think these characters are from? Or number 6, what was your favorite part of the story? And then they share it in their groups of 3 students. Okay, so that's my go-to activity after Dear Time. And then they read for fun, and then they share what they liked about the book. And try to choose the questions. So it's not about right or wrong. It's about the opinion. So there's no right or wrong, you know, it's about your favorite character, or how many, do you like this story? Why or why not? It's okay. We have to practice with students that it's okay to not like the story. And that if you don't like reading, it's just because you didn't find the thing that you really like yet, right? It's like trying new foods. Yeah, you just have to keep trying food until you find something you like. Okay, I think I've answered those two questions.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, for answering the two questions. You have provided a lot of examples as well. So I think the person who asked you question also already get that. But if they haven't got that or need more explanation, they can also provide some replies or feedback on the chat box. And I think we will go to some other question, right? So the next question is, how can we boost students' vocabulary through extensive reading? Practical method, please. And then the next one is, this is about somebody who is involved in a volunteer in literacy community. So she is in Boyolali town. She is asking, uh, from the first, their first activities were all being flawless, but at this time they don't have any more ideas to do what kind of other activities for their community. Could you give them some ideas to make some interesting follow-up activities for them in their community?
Okay, great questions. So the first one about the vocabulary, I think that it's important that the teacher reads to the students. Let me find my picture like this. So if your story has some important vocabulary, for example, if the book is about foods, different food, then I would write those food names on the board. So before, we call it pre-reading, before you read, that you teach students the vocabulary, right? So that's one thing, to make sure that you pre-teach them the vocabulary. If it's for extensive reading, like deer time, they could, I think that if they do deer and then they do the post-reading activity, they probably have to use some of the important vocabulary to explain about the book to their friends. You could also have them make a list of vocabulary words, like a vocab log, like a list of words in their notebook, like one word a day, and then they could just look that up for homework, or they could write that, make a sentence with that word later. So I think you can make vocabulary activities out of the extensive reading. And for the second question, ideas in the community. So I'll share some, don't think I have the picture here. Okay, so last semester in the fall, after students created their books, we actually did some community outreach visits. So I will copy this. Okay, this is for my other PowerPoint. Okay, so I had students practice reading out loud in groups. Then I had students practice reading to the class. And then we went to and then for their final project, we went to an elementary school. These are my university students. And then they read the books to the kids. And then they also play the dice game with the dadu and answer questions for fun. And we also did this with the neighborhood visit. And there's the idea of like, I do, and then we do together with the student. And then we gave the students copies of the books that my students wrote, because it's about Manado culture and it's in Bahasa Manado, so they can understand better. And we gave the students their own books, and you can see this girl is really interested in reading it by herself, which was great. So it's the same book that they read to them, and then they give them a copy. So I think that having the repetition of like the teacher or students, older students doing it and then doing it together and then giving them a copy of the book worked well for us. We also did some chants, like when we said some call and response. So when we said babaca itu, and then the students had to say asik, okay, to make it fun. So those are some activities that you could do, especially in remote areas. Yeah. So this only required printing and dice and paper.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Actually, we got also a question on YouTube. Can I read it for you?
Sure.
So the question is, how about managing our time to grow our reading culture for beginners? Yeah, that's a question. How about
Yeah,
managing
I
our
think
time to
that
grow reading culture for beginners?
if it's beginners and it's not beginners in English or beginners in reading,
In reading,
you know.
actually. In reading.
So it's like low level English.
To develop reading culture for beginners.
Okay, let's imagine that the students are low-level English speakers. For example, these students at the elementary school, they don't really have English class, right? So we did this game in Bahasa Manado. Okay, so I would suggest that if you are teaching beginner students, that you use more of the local language. Okay, so try to provide the books. There's more try to give them the option of having Bahasa Indonesia books, right? So that they are able to read it. And then I think the rest of the things that apply, like making reading fun, you can still do that then. And it would be about building literacy in the first language in the L1 before we try to build literacy in English, right? So that's why it was really great that my students created books in Bahasa Manado so that the adik-adik can read it in Bahasa Manado too. Also, I've had my university students who are English majors, when they read to their adik-adik, they translate it into Bahasa Manado, right? So they take the book, it's in English or in Indonesian, and they explain the story using Bahasa Manado.
Okay, Rachel, we still have 5 minutes. Can we have 2 more questions?
Sure.
Okay, so the next question is from Eka Mariandeni from Bali. I still find difficulty when asked students to read both scanning and skimming to get the main idea of a passage at the crisis time. Could you please give me a solution to improve and increase students' interest in reading a text so that they can get the point or the main idea of a text easily? Thank you. So I think this is regarding how to teach them skimming and scanning in order to help them to get the main idea of a text. Okay, can we have
Sure.
another question? The
Yeah.
next question, probably the last one because of time limitation, is how to teach student reading in this condition while we not meet student directly. So teaching reading in the time of pandemics.
Okay, so for the first question, it's about getting the main point. Okay, in English, we call that summarizing. I think the Indonesian summarizing is a little bit different, but for me, summarizing means like very short and concise. So I ask students after they read the book through YouTube video, that they try to summarize it in just one sentence, and they can only choose the most important points. But I think you have to practice this a lot and maybe choose a different name like English summarize, because Indonesian summarize, I think, means explain the whole story. So I used this chart, which you can see the URL down below. It's a free download. It's called SWBST. It means somebody, you say the main character, wanted what the main character wants, but the problem. So how does the character try to solve the problem? then what's the ending? Okay, so we could say the main character Leo moved to Papua and wanted to make friends, but they made fun of him for being different. So the teacher explains to the class about Binaka Tunggal Ika. Then the students become friends with each other and they realize that being different is actually important and really great. Okay, so you can see that I summarized this story in just one sentence. I think that's the best way to practice getting the main idea, and you can do it through children's books because it's more fun for students, and then move on to more, textbook articles. The second question, okay, about teaching online. So I think that it still holds in terms of what I did, like reading the children's books out loud over Zoom. I think that's very important. Using YouTube, if they don't have internet access, I gave them different assignments. So I think it's important to offer alternative assignments if they can't watch YouTube videos because of the network connection, right? So I had them like keep a gratitude journal or make a haiku or other activities that I thought of that don't need a lot of internet. So it's important to give options. I think I asked students about their situation. So they filled out a survey about like what technology do they have and who are they living with and what is the biggest problem in their lives right now. And I asked them to be very honest and direct with me. Other things, I think it's important to be consistent about like the time, but also flexible. And I think that you can use the free resources like that I provided for you to try to teach them over the internet. If you can't do Zoom classes, you can just send them the free story because they're usually stories, and hopefully students are interested enough. Or you can have students create their own stories. Just do the mini book thing.
Okay.
And you could read that as reading.
Okay, thank you very much. We actually still got some question, but unfortunately, the time for session 1 of the webinar should be closed right now. So we cannot cover all the questions. So I suggest for all the participants who still have questions for the presenters, you still contact her through the social media that
yes, I'll show my contact.
Yeah, that's
especially email.
Yeah,
would be good because then I can attach some documents or something.
More preferably through email, okay? So before I close the first session of the webinar, I would like to summarize some major points that has been delivered by the speaker. The first one is reading problems in Indonesia, such as low motivation to read and Indonesia's literacy level that was still in the rank of 62 out of 74 countries, could be caused by the damaging concept that science and math define students' competence. And also, reading isn't in the family culture. And also, the idea of reading equals to studying. There are two types of reading. The first one is intensive reading, which is slow, skill building, and test focus. And the second one is extensive reading, which is faster, fluency building, and pleasure focus. Extensive reading is important because it increases reading ability. And then there are some aspects of affect and motivation as well. And it develops vocabulary and spelling, and it enhances listening and speaking as well. The last one, how to introduce extensive reading in the classes. There are some ideas that has been shared by the speaker. One of the first example was the dear time. And then the second one is teacher as the model. The next one is unit project. The next one is read aloud activities. There are some other activities as well, but I just took some major examples from those activities. And also, there is one quote that I take that was, I think, very powerful from your presentation, which is challenges are opportunities for growth. And I think this kind of quote should be the principle for us, primarily for the teachers during teaching, during the pandemic. There are so many challenges that we face on how to teach our subjects or courses effectively, but let's take these challenges as our opportunities to grow as a better teacher, like that. So probably you have a concluding sentence or concluding remarks before we close your session.
Yeah, I think that you did an amazing job of summarizing everything that I said. And I think that, again, I challenge all of us to just let's make reading fun. I believe that we can do it.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. It's our pleasure to have you here. We really hope that we have extensive times to be in this webinar with you, but we have to proceed with the second session. Probably we will meet again later, okay? Yeah,
Yes,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, everyone, we have concluded our first session of the webinar. And right now we are going to the second session. And this second session will be presented by Mr. Hanung Triyoko, MHUM MAD, with the title of Collaboration for Online Learning. But before I give the time for Mr. Hanung, I would like to read some of his bio first. So Mr. Hanung took bachelor degree in Gajah Mada University in English literature, and then he continued his master degree in UGM as well in linguistics, but he also took second master degree in educational leadership and management in La Trobe University, Australia. And right now, Mr. Hanung is the head of the language development unit of IAIN Salatiga, but there are also some notable professional histories from him, such as being the secretary and head of the English department, the developer and facilitator of Indonesian Massive Open Online Course, the counterpart of Relo English Language Fellows from 2013 until 2020. And then the last one, this is the most recent one, is being the coordinator of English of the consortium of the Center for Language Development of State Islamic Higher Education Institution across Indonesia, which will conclude in 2024. Okay, so without dragging more time, we will directly give the time to Mr. Hanung to deliver the presentation with the title of Collaboration for Online Learning. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, especially I like to say good morning to Mbak Dian Safitri from Relo, and also, of course, to Halimah. Yeah, I wonder how can Rachel Wang say EIN perfectly, not IAIN. So I believe to Halima reminded Rachel many times about the pronunciation, yeah, not IAIN, but EIN. That's great. You know, I'm always amazed by what ELF did in Indonesia. They did not just help us a lot with the teaching, the promotion of better English teaching, but they always have some creativity. They always have all that spirits to learn much about our culture, and that what make me really enjoy working with Relo. By the way, if you haven't known what Relo is the Regional English Language Office, and Relo can work with us if we can be the host for this language field. Rachel Wang. Rachel were here in Indonesia for 2 years, yeah, in Manado and also Devon, in Salatiga. But unfortunately, during this coronavirus pandemic, they had to end their term before it really end. I mean, before the schedules. But we're already very fortunate to have them with us to promote better English learning. As all of you have learned through this webinar just now, how Rachel shared with us her experience in teaching reading, and perhaps we could not imagine that we could actually do that, could actually make the teaching of the reading much more interesting and engage a student so much. Okay, I'm thinking about my part in these webinars, and I'm happy that I found this like a collaboration for online learning, because I think that's one of the key for the success of teaching nowadays during the corona pandemic, because we cannot meet students, we have to do things online, and many times studying and learning online can provoke that feeling of being lonely, that student left thinking that the teachers just gave them learning materials, but they still feel they learn very little because they feel nobody trying to help them, or nobody was there when they really need help. Of course, we as teachers, we do not have all that much time to connect to each of our students online, but there's one way that we can make it happen, that each of our students feel that they are together with everyone else in their study. And that is the thing about collaboration. I would like to present you more about that. So let me share with you the screen. Now, let me share my screen. Okay, can you have that PowerPoint presentation? Okay, good. Okay, wait. I'm going to do the slideshow. Okay, yeah, that's it. The question is, why collaboration? Many times we know that word collaboration, quite similar to cooperation. But what's the difference? Why do we need to use the word collaboration, not cooperation? The point is the things about responsibility, about the shared responsibility. When we do some cooperation, sometimes it just means that we do things together, but we do not do that thing for our own goal, for our own purpose. We have the concept of gotong royong in our culture. Like, for example, we do the gotong royong in building a house for someone living in our neighborhood. We do that happily because things get done easier and faster because everyone help them building the house or help the owner of the house to build the house. But the question is, who is responsible for that house or for building the house? Not everyone is responsible. So sometimes in gotong royong or in cooperation, the involvement of everyone is not the same, is not similar. And that's different with collaboration. So everyone need to be there with their own purposes, with their own goal. And so the being there is more recognizable, like, because they have responsible for finishing it or for starting it and then for finishing that things they do. Yeah, I remember when Rachel said things about the problem of reading in Indonesia. Just before she involved students to do something with that, to finally to produce their own books for other to read. Rachel said things about the problem of reading in Indonesia. By doing that, actually, Rachel, as the teacher or instructor here, like to share with the student as an objective, so that when everyone feels that they are responsible for that, when everyone, every student thinks that, yeah, I have to do something to increase the level of the activeness of reading in Indonesia, that I have to do something. Okay, by getting that feeling, being responsible of what happened, then everyone start to involve in collaboration, not just cooperation. Another thing with collaboration, different with cooperation, is that collaboration is a process. What does it mean? It means that even though we start something together, we do one project together, and we do not intend that to be collaborative, but then on the way, when we found some goals that everyone can share, we can make it collaboration, not just cooperation. So do not worry about the difference between collaboration and cooperation, because collaboration itself is a process. One, you can share that responsibility to everyone, then you have to start the collaboration. That is the point also when we talk about collaboration and cooperation. Another thing I like to focus on when we talk about collaboration for online learning is that no teacher can force learning to happen. Teachers can prepare everything before the teaching, can prepare the learning materials for students to learn, but how much students learn really depend on themselves. Actually, many research prove that students really make it very influential for themselves to learn much or to learn little because they have that responsibility. So if you have, as a teacher, very interesting materials, very ready material for the student to study, but if the student themselves, they do not have that motivation, they do not have that responsibility, we cannot expect them to learn something. So the first thing that the teachers make sure is about the responsibility of studying. And when the student have that responsibility, then learning can happen. Another thing I like to also mention about the theory of connectivism. We all know that nowadays is not the time when students learn a lot of things from teachers only. We can learn a lot of things from many sources, even from other students. Learning happens when a learner connect to the source of learning. So stop thinking that you are the only sources now, that teachers are the only source of learning. With the theory of connectivity, we give the student much more opportunity to connect to the source of learning because what? Because they have the responsibility, and when they have the responsibility, they become creative, they find many resources, and even they can learn from their friend also. Okay, well, when I read the research from Sun and Chan, effective online instruction depending upon one, well-designed course content, motivated interaction between the instructor and learners, well-prepared and fully supported instructor, well-prepared and fully supported instructor. How can we be well-prepared and fully supported instructor? Of course, if we do all the things by ourselves, it will be harder for us to do so. If we take all the responsibility ourselves, things get very much difficult. But if we share the responsibility with the student also, and everyone then become supportive of the learning, and everyone help each other because they have their responsibility, then that's the first thing that can guarantee the success of online instruction community. Many times I heard Rachel say things about community, learning community. this is really what we have to establish. I think, very important from the very beginning in our online courses or online teaching. We have to make sure that we have this learning community where everyone there in the learning community take part, feel responsible, and feel that they can learn from each other. They can share a lot of things, not just expecting things from the teacher. And this is what happened in Indonesia when commonly we have this teacher-centered approach, our culture still instill that value that we have to respect teacher so much because teacher is the sole sources of knowledge. But that kind of understanding should be over now because it's time of internet. Knowledge is there everywhere. With the internet, teacher cannot be the only source of knowledge. And another thing, rapid advancement of technology. Very good to know that internet provide almost anything now that make it easier for everyone to study, to do something, to produce some things. And this is our job as teachers also to keep up with the technology. I don't think that computer will replace us because computer just know the technology, but teacher they know the technology and also the other things that can be very necessary for teaching. And so as teachers we have to equip ourselves with the technology, but also with the other things necessary for making our classroom successful. Well, now I'm going to mention some of collaborative activities that we can do while having online class, and perhaps you know many of them. So let me just start by putting the list first: discussion, and then DIAT, and then role playing, simulation, case studies, small group projects, jigsaws, blogs, debate, fishball. Okay, I think discussion is the most familiar, with us here. But many times when we have discussion, we forget to first instill, or we forget to first let the student know the purpose of the discussion so that everyone feel responsible of the success of the discussion. Many times we have the discussion for the sake of discussion only, and that is not good. We have to make sure that each of the students earn something for the discussion. You get advantage from the discussion so that they can involve more actively in a discussion. Giving the correct question for discussion is very important also. Do not use the same question again and again. We have to make varieties of our question. Question like, for example, asking for more evidence, question for clarification, question open-ended, and then linking or extension question, hypothetical question, cause and effect questions, summary and synthesized questions. Maybe when we do our discussion, we are happy enough to ask them with open-ended question. As long as they do not answer with yes or no, then we think that we can have good question or good discussion. But actually, there are more other type of questions that we can ask. For example, like linking or extension question. What kind of question when we give linking or extension question? For example, like this. How can you relate the answer or your answer to what the government decide or what the government policy on this issue, something like that. So we try to link our discussion to other things outside our classroom. That's linking or extension question. Hypothetical question, like for example, what if you are going to die tomorrow, but you have to save the word. What will be the first thing to do to save the world if you die tomorrow? Something like that. That's kind of hypothetical question. And of course, you can give a lot other examples of question for discussion. But maybe it's good if we move on to the next activities. This is the small version of discussion because it involves pair student, or you can also say it's pairing student. Why should we need diet or diet? Because sometimes students can only involve in a good discussion when they feel comfortable, because when they are partnering with someone they like or that they know very much, it can be an exercise for bigger discussion. So sometimes we can do that. We can just let students pick their own partner so they can involve in a more intense discussion. Other activities that we can do, role playing. As we know, with role player, we give opportunity for everyone to act, to be somebody else, to stand on somebody else's shoes, to think not with their own background, but to think and act like what other think in their own situation. So it's very good example for collaborative activities. Okay, and then simulation, quite similar to role playing, but more realistic to life. The difference between role playing and simulation is like in role playing, you can imagine all that can happen, but with simulation, you can take example from the thing that is already happening. Like for example, why does people who do not believe in the pandemic of the corona, why there's an intense debate on the pandemic, so student can have that simulation. And case studies, learning from the things that already happening, trying to evaluate why people involved in that situation do that things or think that way, thing like that. That's case studies. And small group project. Now this is perhaps what Rachel did with the student, making book. Rachel divides student into some group, small groups. Why sometimes we can have small group project? Because sometimes if we involve too many people, it makes the communication more difficult among students. And other activities, for example, jigsaw. With jigsaw, we can allow every student present, or we can give the responsibility for every student to be an expert of one thing and then present their knowledge on their expertise, and other they can then ask question from the student or evaluating his or her knowledge on that. So that's kind of allowing all to build knowledge together from a small portion. Give small portion to everyone, but then when they collect it, it can become a big knowledge. Also with blogs, we can allow students to write blogs in small free from the perspective of the student, because they can pick all that topic they like, and debate. Well, this is also something that we perhaps do quite often, besides discussion, debate. But in Indonesia, it's not that easy to have intense debate because of our culture. We are not trained to debate. We are we are trained to confirm, to maintain harmony, and that's the thing. So sometimes quite difficult. But if we can have a very controversial issue where no one humiliate each other, but they do the debate for building knowledge, I think we have to start doing this more often in our class to have debate. And fishball. Fishball is like giving up one opportunity for students to show their skill. For example, going back to Rachel examples, they create their book, and so they show their books and let others comment on their books in terms of display of the book, in terms of the language, and all other things. Okay, well, I think I'm waiting for much involvement from you guys that are here in a webinar, so we can have quite good discussion. So I'll give the opportunity back to Mas Hasbi for the question and answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hanung, for the great presentation. And right now we are going to open the question and answer session. So I would like to invite all participants to share their questions, whether in the chat box on Zoom or in the comment section on YouTube. So let's check whether we already have some questions for Mr. Hanung. Yeah, actually, we still haven't got a question on YouTube, and then I still cannot find as well on the Zoom. So probably while waiting their question, probably they are still thinking about what question to be asked. So can we just connect the two contents of the session 1 and session 2, how the content from session 1 about the reading and then the second one about online collaboration can complement each other. What's relation in it? What should we learn from it? So what about that? So probably even Rachel, you can also join in this session as well, in order to make a connection between your session and Mr. Hanung's session.
Yeah, I think that Pak Hanung gave so many examples of interactive activities. So there's many people asking about activities for reading, that these activities can all be used either like pre or post reading, like the dyad, like pair discussion before the readings. It could be a debate. I really liked what Pak Hanung said about making sure that there's no like humiliation, because sometimes with debate, the winners and losers, right, feel bad. I really enjoyed that. So I was thinking about that in my own classroom, and we tried to do an activity called Circle of Viewpoints, I believe, where each person pretends to be a different perspective, and then they have a debate from that. So it's not really, and it's more collaborative because they have to work together to solve a problem. So maybe in terms of reading, maybe each student could take the perspective of a character in the story, and then they can try to answer some question or solve a problem as the characters, or maybe they have to work together to decide something. So that's what made me really excited about with Pak Hanun's great presentation. I think it would tie in really well.
Okay, so yeah, Mr. Hanung.
Yeah, Rachel, when you presented things about student project in making books, I wonder how can you motivate your university students to create book which is not actually for them, for maybe they created a book for the lower level of student? How can you convince them that this is a good activity? Yes.
Yeah, that's a great question. In the first semester, I think I motivated them because I asked them to first think about why are they proud of their local culture? What is special about your local culture? And then what would you want people outside of Indonesia or even in Java or Sumatra, what would you want them to know about Manado? And then I gave them the motivation of like, if I take these books to another country, what would you want them to learn from your books? And then in this semester, because of the pandemic, but we still have the collaboration with the YSEALI project, Salute Semangat. And so the motivation was, okay, Salute Semangat is going to use the stories that they like the most for education materials to teach younger kids about protecting the environment and protecting the special animals in North Sulawesi. So that was the motivation for completing the project. And then day to day, I think they just enjoyed, because each class was, I was reading a book, it's very fun. So they feel like it's, they really want to join. So I'm still able to have like 30, 40 students on Zoom, which is amazing, I think.
Okay, so Mr. Hanung, you just show us 10 examples of activities for collaborating. Do you think those activities, some of those activities can also be utilized to teach reading?
Well, yeah, one of them is very clear already, like for example, mini project, like what Rachel already did, making books after they finished their reading class. So they can also kind of representing what they read in the form of book, like for example, bridging a novel, a very difficult novel because of the level of English, and then they have to simplify the language, and they produce the bridging version of the novel. And that's the thing with the mini project. Also with the pre-activities like discussion, before reading, they are asked with questions to answer, and so they can find the answer from that reading later on. But with the pre-activity of reading, we can prepare their mind to the reading, so they know exactly what to find during the reading. And also perhaps with the jigsaw, for example, if we read something about corona, one student, for example, can present things about being a family of doctor, for example, because that student is the children or is the child of a doctor, for example, so they can tell things about that first before they read the books or the article, something like that. Actually, it is our activity to connect that activities with the goal of the teaching.
Okay, so you are saying that they are very adaptable to all skills.
Yes.
We can use them to teach all skills, including reading, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we haven't got a new question, but actually we have some earlier questions that haven't been answered, but I think very related to both themes of the presentation. Shall we try to answer that question also?
Yeah, sorry, Rachel, if there's still a question for you, which has not have not been answered yet. Do you think you can have more time to refer to that question?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, I have a question for you, Pat, first. Do you have a favorite
Yes.
activity for your classroom? It doesn't have to be related to reading, but do you have any favorite activities that you like to do?
Well,
Hello?
Where does he
Did it
go?
freeze?
in teaching,
Come back.
yeah, my
Hello?
most favorite activities during teaching online is to allow students to do the discussion, and but before they inform in the discussion, they have to prepare question first, and then let other decide which question that can provoke intense discussion or which one is not, because sometimes students themselves cannot inform in a good discussion because they cannot ask a good question. So first of all, before we start the discussion, my favorite thing to do is to allow my student to create as many questions first, and then let everyone decide which question to discuss.
So they come up with a list,
Yes, the
written
list of
list?
questions.
And do you give them a topic, or
Yeah,
do they
yeah.
get to
Of
decide
course,
the
we
topic?
the topic, but sometimes they can also pick up their own topic also, because nowadays, if we involve students, I think it will be much better. Give them more
Yeah.
feeling of responsibility.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that ties in well. It could tie into all skills, but if we want to make it for reading, after they read some article or children's book story, then they can choose, think of how many questions that they want to ask and
Yes.
make a list and then
Yeah,
decide.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, I'm gonna try your activity next time.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, so there is this question.
Have you? Yeah.
Do you want to add a little more?
Sure. Which question is it?
Okay, so there is this question, and I think this question can be answered by both of you because this is very suitable for both team of presentation. So the question is, the case with Indonesian classroom, we have commonly we have big class, usually consists of 30 under 40 students in a class, and within this class there are variety of level of students English, like some of them are very spectacular, some of them are middle, and some of them also are low in their English performance. Not only in their English, but also in their motivations to learn. So how should we teachers deal with this variety of skills and motivation in our class? So this can be answered by both of you, actually.
You go first, Rachel, or me?
Okay. Okay. One thing that I thought of is, let me just share my screen again really quickly. One thing I thought about is with the questions in the post-reading activity to make sure it's a lower level. Like, for example, for the first question, actually, my original question is, which character do you relate to the most? Why? Which character do you relate to the most means like which character you connect with, right? But that's more advanced than just saying who is your favorite character, right? And then also, if you have lower level students, also to give the sentence starter. Sentence starter means you start by saying, my favorite character is, and then they can just fill in the blank, right? And you could also do that with all of these questions. Like, I like this story because, da, 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 da. And so sentence starter means you start the sentence for students and then they can just fill it in. So I would try to provide options. So for number one, you can have, if you want, you could just have the beginner one. And then, or you could divide it into 2 sections and be like, if you feel advanced today, or if you feel like you want to have an easier time today, you can choose which version of the same question. That's what I was thinking about. So sentence starters, and then giving like a easier version and a harder version of the similar question. Does that help answer the question?
Dalam?
Hanun, do you have anything else to add?
Well, Mas Hasbi, can you please say your question again? Is it related to reading only or any other skills?
It's actually about the mixed ability in the classroom. So we have large number of students in a class with different level of English ability, high, middle, low, and also different level of motivation, high motivation, low motivation. How should we teachers deal with this in order to create successful learning, but for everyone with different types of level of understanding and then capability and then motivation in a class?
Well, one of the things I did for dealing with so many different background of the student is grouping, Mas. Yeah, we have to be realistic that sometimes we have to pick which material we have to teach, and really we cannot pick one particular material suitable for all background of students. So sometimes grouping is the key. Like for example, if I already makes grouping of student and student themselves, they feel comfortable with the grouping or with their own group. Sometimes I differentiate the materials for them to learn. For example, in terms of translation, for a stronger group of students, I give them quite harder text to translate. But for those who still do not have that strong skill in translation, then I gave them lower level of English for them to translate. So that's what I did many times if I have to face with so many different levels of skill of my students to differentiate the learning materials.
So it is actually okay to give different materials to students in a same class?
Yeah, I personally think it's okay to do that.
Okay.
There's also a website called News ELA, and that you can choose different levels of the articles.
Yeah.
So you can use
Would
some.
you mind typing the name of the website in the chat box?
Yes, I will.
Oh yeah, yeah, already did. You already did.
Okay. I think there's some other sites as well, but I heard about News ELA. But I think that you might need to either students can make an account or maybe the teacher can just take a screenshot or something. Yeah, but I didn't actually use it, but I heard it's very useful.
Okay. Okay, actually it's about the time for ending the session, but we still have one question. Should we answer that or leave it? Because we still have like few minutes of time.
I think we can answer that. Which question, Mas Hasbi?
The question is posted on YouTube, so I will read it for you too. So the question is, if you happen teaching in remote area where there is no technological support or away from the so-called modern devices, how would you tackle down the circumstances in teaching? Do you have any idea?
Wow, that's a
Very challenging, very tough one.
yeah, very tough one, especially because I haven't experienced that myself. I've never had any experience teaching in a place where there's no internet. Well, I think the only possible way I can think of is to have kind of personal approach to yeah, we have to spend a bit more time, bit more energy to reach to our student personally, even if necessary. We can teach them, can facilitate them in their learning based on their own needs. So if necessary, we may forget a little bit about the curriculum or about the recommended learning materials, because if we teach them that and the student cannot accept that, cannot catch up with that curriculum, what is for? So yeah, I think that's what I can think of teaching in that situation, Mas Hasbi, to be more personal in this situation. Yeah, what do you think, Rachel?
I think that you kind of have to be creative, like use what you have. For example, right now for Zoom, to make it interactive, I'm often asking them like yes or no questions, and they do thumbs up for yes and thumbs down for no. Or to answer multiple choice question, they can do 1, 2, 3, 4, and they can choose their option, because I think everyone has fingers, so we can use the fingers in the class. And I also, in my classroom with no electricity, I used a lot of drawing, like have students draw something. Hopefully you have pen and paper, or like at least your students have pen and paper. But to practice everything from like grammar or pronunciation, I had them draw something. Like if we're using like present perfect, and then ask your partner, have you ever like climbed a mountain? And then if they say like yes, then you could have the other partner draw a picture of the student climbing the mountain and then make one sentence like, you know, Rachel has climbed a mountain, and draw a picture of their partner or something like that. So I did a lot of drawing and using paper, pencil, sticky notes if you have, or markers if you have. And I taped papers to the walls to print out articles, and then they go around and look at it, because I have too many students. I can't print out that many papers, things like that. And hopefully you already have like a textbook that you can use. And I think thinking of ways that you can have them have students write something or draw something based on the textbook topic, or use what they have, like fingers, or acting, like to teach vocabulary, you can act out the vocabulary word. I think things like that don't use a lot of resources.
Okay, so we as teachers should be creative in utilizing all the resources surrounding us, what we have. It doesn't have to be sophisticated technology, tools, handphone, computer, and so on and so on. That's it. Okay, so we have come to the end of both sessions, and we would like also to thank you to Rachel again for joining the discussion session for the second session of the webinar. Thank you very much. And before I close my part, I would like to read some of the notes that I have taken during Mr. Hanung's presentation, just like what I did with your presentation, Rachel. So the first one is that collaboration connects the social feeling among teacher and students, as well as students and students. So that's why collaboration should be put above cooperation, with additional or extra benefits, such as because collaboration allow us to have shared objective, outcomes, and mission, and not just supporting each other. The second one is effective online instruction depends upon well-designed course content, motivated interaction between the instructor and learners, well-prepared and fully supported instructor, creation of a sense of online learning community, and rapid advancement of technology. The last one, Mr. Hanung provides some examples of collaborative activities. There are 10 of them actually. The first one is discussion. The next one is pairing discussion, role playing, simulation, case studies, small groups projects, jigsaws, blogs, debates, and fish bowls. So before I close Mr. Hanung's session, probably Mr. Hanung has a final word as a message or as an emphasis of what you have presented to the all participants.
Yeah, my concluding remark for this, that even though it's a kind of blessing in disguise that with the internet we can share a lot of learning materials from multimedia, internet providers everywhere, but we have to always remember that without feeling responsible, without having a learning community, students feel lonely. So let us share the responsibility. Let us create learning community first. Yeah. So only by creating learning opportunity, we can guarantee the success of the online course or online teaching.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hanung, for the concluding remark. So finally, we have come to the end of the session of webinar. The first presentation by Rachel and the second presentation by Mr. Hanung have been delivered very well. And I think we should give an online applause for them. How should we do that? But we feel, yes, we are thankful for all the knowledges, experiences that have you both shared to us. And we hope that we can apply this in our classrooms. So finally, I will give the chance to the master of the ceremony. And I would like to apologize if when delivering the two sessions, there are so many mistakes that happen in the middle. So thank you very much. And to Miss Marisa, the time is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hesby. Well, before we go to the next agenda, I would like to remind you that we have shared the link of certificate in the chat, Zoom, and also YouTube. Hopefully, you can directly go to the link because we have only few minutes to open the access. Well, let's go to the next agenda, namely giving the certificate online for the presenters officially. So please, Mr. Aziz, maybe you can share the online certificates. Firstly, for Miss Raquel.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very well-designed certificate.
Well, okay. Next is for Mr. Hanung as the second presenter.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. The last is online screenshot for pictures. So please, Mr. Aziz, you can help us to take some screenshot, or you can use your for anybody you can use your mobile phone or also your laptop. Okay. First is formal style. So let me give you 3 seconds to prepare. So maybe everybody you can turn on your video so we can see your face in our screen. Okay, everybody ready? Okay, Mas Aziz, are you ready to take a picture of us? Okay, now let me count until 3. Formal style. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now second is freestyle. So you can choose your own style. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now, well, thank you. Great, everyone, especially Rachel. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you being here, everybody. Hope our webinar has beneficial for you, and we do hope that if we conduct our next webinar, all of the participants today can join again. So I suggest that you do not leave the WhatsApp group in order not to miss the next information related to webinar. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Let's close by reciting hamdalah together. Alhamdulillah. Amin. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you so much for
Yeah.
organizing everything.
Bye-bye,
I'm going to go to
Rachel.
bed.
Yeah,
Go to
good
sleep.
night.
Good night.
Iya, Nova toh. Mbak, kok akhirnya kok yang datang kok dikit sekali ya? Oh, sorry. Aku sudah limiting kok. Masih.
Unmute, Pak.
Oh.